Hello everyone, and welcome back to the first micro lecture of the new module. Today we're going to focus on marijuana use and policies surrounding legalization in the United States. This one is going to be a little bit longer than we normally lecture for, but there is a lot to get through in this lecture. In my opinion, in teaching this class, this is always the lecture that you look forward to the most. So let's go ahead and get started. So what exactly are we talking about with marijuana? What is it? It is a naturally growing hemp plant. There are many different varieties and hybrid plants these days, but the two main types are cannabis sativa and cannabis indica. There is a third strain that is lesser known called cannabis ruderalis, which is typically not as cultivated as the other two types. Normally, you can find it growing on the roadside in places like Russia and Central Asia. The main ingredient is THC. With the plant, it is also capable of producing CBD, which is a derivative of THC without the mental effects involved with THC. We'll talk about the two varieties, THC and CBD, later. One of the biggest things that is happening now is the creation of hybrid varieties of marijuana in order to create a stronger product with higher levels of THC. This is not an unusual phenomenon in terms of gardening and the growing of plants. People do this all the time with tomatoes, melons, and other types of food. So why not marijuana as well? Without getting into the hybrid aspects of plant growth too much right now, in general, indica plants have lower THC compared to the sativa variety. Even though the marijuana plants are a full plant, you are really only interested in one specific part of it, the bud. That's where the highest concentration of THC is within the plant. You are going to harvest it, dry it out, and then you'll be able to smoke it or do whatever else you want with it. Marijuana use is by no means a new phenomenon. However, contemporary marijuana use is getting a bit more complicated these days. Marijuana is the single most commonly used federal illegal drug in the U.S., with more than 48.2 million people using it last year. You notice I said federally illegal, and that's true, but we will discuss the legality issues later on in subsequent micro lectures. This isn't anything new. We've been smoking a lot of pot for a lot of years. It was permitted for years and years as a patent medicine and was described as having medicinal value as early as 1850. Additionally, the hemp plant itself, not the marijuana buds, but the plant has been used for a variety of uses dating back to colonial times. It wasn't until 1937, with the passage of the Marijuana Tax Act, that we see the first form of federal legal legislation outlawing the drug. We will get into the reasons behind this in our legalization microlecture, but as you can imagine, there were very political reasons for why marijuana was being outlawed. Despite the legalization question, people are still consuming marijuana in vast quantities. As you may remember from earlier in the semester, we purchase more marijuana annually than we do chocolate. According to 2021 data, 19% of U.S. adults said that they used weed at least once in that last year, with 13% averaging use in the last month. This does not include the use of CBD products, but just THC-based marijuana. Of the people who are most likely to use it, those under 25 are the most likely to consume, and then the usage rate tapers off as we age. Why does our rate of use begin to decrease after the age of 25? As you probably can imagine, there is a certain level of abstinence that occurs when we get older. We get jobs, we buy houses, and we have children. And all things that we don't want to use or lose rather, due to drug charges if we live in an illegal state. But do we want to quit, or are we just being wary? With marijuana legalization expanding every year, we're seeing millions of people try it for the first time every year. As we said before, there are two main varieties of marijuana that we see people using. The first is cannabis sativa, and it is grown in predominantly hot countries with high temperatures. Typically, these strains have origins in Colombia, Mexico, Jamaica, South Africa, Thailand, and Southeast Asia. However, they can be grown indoors and in the U.S. under the proper simulated conditions. The leaves are a bright green and are a bit narrower in size. The plant can grow as tall as 6 foot on average, but can often grow even higher than that. This type of plant is usually grown outside because of the height issue. It is definitely the taller of the two strains and grows more narrowly than it does bushy. It has more of a euphoric and a cerebral effect. This strain is typically used by those who want the high, but who don't want to be slugs all day. Sativa causes uplifting and energetic feelings, and it serves as an appetite stimulant and provides pain relief. So in thinking about that description, who might be an ideal user for this variety of marijuana? Those with debilitating medical conditions, such as cancer patients, those with chronic pain, and those who might be experiencing PTSD and more. The effects of sativa are known for its cerebral high, while indica is known for both its sedative effects, which some people prefer for nighttime use. Both types are used as medical cannabis. Indica plants are normally shorter and stockier than sativas. They have broader, deeply serrated leaves and a compact and dense flower cluster. The effects of indica are prominently physical and sedative. The effects of sativa are well known for its cerebral high, while indica is known for its sedative effects, which some people prefer for nighttime use, as I said. Cannabis indica comes from countries that are already producing a lot of hemp plants. This strain has its origins in hash-producing countries with very warm climates such as Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Turkey, Morocco, and Tibet. But again, it can be grown indoors and in the U.S. when growers reproduce the correct climates for this strain. There is less THC in indica, which causes more of a sedative effect. A good way to remember the difference is in the name itself. If you want to relax, use indica, because the only thing you will want to do is lay in the couch. Sativa gives you that little pick-me-up that you might be wanting. Both types are used for medical and recreational cannabis users. Indica plants are normally shorter and stockier than sativas. Both pictures I have shown you of the plants are from backyard growers in legal states that allow for plant growth. You can see from this picture how much bushier the indica plants are compared to the sativa plants. They have broader, deeply serrated leaves and are a compact and dense flower cluster. The effects of indicas are prominently physical and sedative. Here are the two leaves from the different plants. Sativa plants have a thinner, more spindly type of leaf, and it is a lighter green. Indica is a fatter, broader leaf that is darker in color. The buds, however, look similar in structure, but definitely differ in color. Here is a better close-up look at the plant when it is budding. Look at the plants themselves. The indica plant is bushier, fatter, and more squat in nature. It is better suited to growing indoors, whereas the sativa plant is taller, thinner, and more tree-like than the indica plant. I'm not going to go over the full anatomy of the cannabis plant, but both indica and sativa contain the same basic structures. You're welcome to pause the lecture and read the different aspects of the plants, which aspects are present. However, I want to point out a few things to you here. First, the cola and the trichomes are the most important aspects of the plants. That's the most vital source of THC for the plant as it grows its buds. As the buds develop, you will see the trichomes being produced. Without going into too much detail about when to harvest, growers want to see those sugar-like crystals being produced as it is approaching the right time to cultivate. As you can see on this slide, this is the anatomy of a female cannabis plant. The male cannabis plant is nearly identical, but that one will produce a bumper crop of seeds within the bud itself, sometimes to the point where the entire bud is made up of seed and not so much usable bud. Growers prefer the female plant as it is more useful to the user. However, without the male plants, we could not create additional plants. Here is a better, more close-up look at the buds specifically. You can see those trichomes right up close, the little sugar crystals that are really marijuana resin. Normally, you want to dry that out so the bud can be smoked, but in recent years, the resin has been collected by manufacturers and sold in that form. You can then smoke the pure resin for an even more potent high than from the bud itself. This is a process called dabbing. The resin is also used in the production of THC oil that can then be vaped. In addition to technological advancements with resins and oils, we're also seeing advancements in the way that marijuana is grown. One of the biggest trends that you're seeing, thanks in part to legalization, is the development of hybrid plants. As you can see from this picture, there are a ton of different strains, and this isn't even a fraction of it. To date, there are more than 700 different recognized strains of marijuana and counting. Some of these strains can get as strong as 35% THC, which is an outrageous amount. You can only get that strong a plant when you work on developing different strength strains and potencies. Growers work to cross-pollinate strains and create these hybrid plants that are becoming insanely strong. I know that the wording on the photo might be a little bit smaller, but if you look closely, then you would see that some of the strains have the initials S, I, or H on them. The S is for sativa, I is for indica, and H, that's for the hybrid. You'll also see some of the names. Anytime you see something with the name Kush in it, you're seeing a derivative type of marijuana from the indica strain. It has its beginnings in Afghanistan, North Pakistan, and the Western India area. The name comes from the Hindu Kush mountain range. This is by no means a finalized list of all the different strains out there, but it is a good way to explore the vast operation that exists in the marijuana trade. There is a race to grow the biggest plants with the strongest bud. Think of it similarly to the alcohol industry. There are top shelf alcohols, and then there are low-grade swills that are much cheaper. The weed industry is much in the same way. There are strong strains that are much more potent, and then there is the scrub weed, which is not as potent by any means, but will still get you high enough. Let's discuss the way that marijuana is grown for a few minutes. Obviously, like all plants, it can be grown outside in fields where it doesn't have many space restrictions. For those who are clandestine growing or who are not in the proper climate for certain strains, indoor growth might be the answer. The only issue with indoor growth is a lack of sunlight, lack of soil, and space limitations. Did I say there was only one issue? To get around the lack of soil, people have turned to hydroponic growth. This is not a new practice and is one that works to grow all types of different plants, not just marijuana. Tomatoes do very well in hydroponic situations. But basically, hydroponic means to grow in water. You don't need any soil for these types of grows. Because there is no soil, the roots never settle into something, so it's very easy to transport them and move them around when they get too big for their current bucket. You really need a rich mineral water that takes the place of the soil, whereas the soil is traditionally the main provider for the plant. So without it, you need to supplement for those minerals. There are different supplements to add to the water that fertilize the plant just as if it were in the ground. Additionally, as plants need oxygen to grow, the hydroponic method allows for the roots to be exposed to oxygen-rich conditions. To do this, you either need to keep the body of the plant suspended over the water, just letting the roots lay in the water, or you need to place holes in the bucket somewhere to let the oxygen in that way. This process is done in both legitimate and illegitimate grow situations. You see this take place all the time in grow houses. This is a popular method for clandestine labs because you can have them inside the house and law enforcement cannot detect the plants visibly from the outside, at least with the naked eye. There are a few concerns, however, with this idea because in addition to oxygen, what else do plants need to grow? Sunlight. Plants need sunlight, and when there is no sun, heat lamps and LED lights are used as a supplement. However, what would be a huge red flag that a grow house might be present? A giant electric bill, perhaps? Excessive heat coming from the house? Electricity is the biggest need for an indoor growth system. Solar panels would really come in handy here, wouldn't they? As I just mentioned in the last slide, a huge dramatic increase in your electric bill would be a big red flag to the electric company. So if you were operating a clandestine grow house and you didn't want the electric company to catch on, what might you do to avoid detection? It is very popular to splice into your neighbor's electric service to supplement your own. However, once your neighbors realize that their electric bill has increased significantly, they might get suspicious as well. So solar panels might be the way to go on this one. In authorized grow situations, we see the same need for electricity existing. However, they are built to sustain all of the issues we discussed already. They basically look much more professional than the clandestine grow seen here in this photo. But basically, all of the essentials are there. Heat, light, ductwork to help circulate the air, a water source with a motor to circulate the water, and as many plants as you can fit in the space. There are typically two different ways to grow hydroponically if you're not going to grow vertically. Because of the height of the plants when they are mature, typically vertical growth plans are not recommended. So that means each plant needs to get water and will need to have its own bucket system. The first way to grow is through the drip system using a continuous flow solution. Think of this almost as a fish tank of sorts. This one is pretty self-explanatory. There is a basin in which you place the plants and run a line into the tank. The water pump cycles the water into the basin, and then the water leaves the tank through an overflow drain. The cycle then starts all over again when the water recycles itself back into the growing tank. This one is the easier of the two to create and grow. This allows you to have buckets scattered throughout the room as long as they are connected to the drip hoses. The second method is called the NFT system, in which the water doesn't drip so much as it flows through the roots. In order to grow this way, the plants need to be held at an angle for the water to be able to flow and not become stagnant. In continuous flow solution culture, the nutrient solution constantly flows past through the roots. This system is the easier of the two because gravity helps the grow process. This allows for fresh, nutrient-rich water to continuously flow through the roots and then be recycled at the bottom of the tank. The roots are still exposed like in the drip method, so we're still getting the oxygen that the plant needs to grow big. The main advantage of the NFT system over other forms of hydroponics is that the plant roots are exposed to adequate supplies of water, oxygen, and nutrients. In all other forms of production, there is a conflict between the supply of these requirements, since excessive or deficient amounts of one results in an imbalance of one or both of the others. NFT, because of its design, provides a system where all three requirements for healthy plant growth can be met at the same time, provided that the simple concept of NFT is always remembered and practiced. The result of these advantages is the higher yields of high quality produce that are obtained over extended periods of cropping. In this slide, you can actually see a real hydroponic grow room. Which one of the prior grow systems do you think is at play here? If you answered the continuous flow system, then you're correct. This picture shows a 5-gallon bucket in which each plant hovers somewhat over the bucket. There is a hole in the bottom of each bucket, and the water drains out of the bucket into a tank. The tubes that run into each bucket then restarts the cycle, and the water flow gets back into the bucket that way. I'm going to stop here for the first micro lecture of the module. We're going to pick back up and discuss what marijuana does to our bodies upon consumption, and then we're going to end the module with a discussion of legalization. I'll see you back here next time for our next micro lecture.